one of the principles that I've learned in psychology is that people are more likely to try to avoid pain than they are to pursue pleasure. A lot of people know the other fears where there's fight and there's flight and there's freeze, but the one that I see most commonly as a coach is the fawn. That actually was for a lot of women a survival mechanism. Basically, like make yourself small so that you don't get attacked. My therapist years ago said to me, she was like, "You have a lot of self-esteem and not a lot of self-worth." And I was like, "What the heck does that? What?" How I make choices in my finances was based on what other people would think. My father literally said to me one day, he's like, "If you keep acting this way," and by this way, he meant like I was just very loud and outspoken. He said, "No one's going to want to marry you." Money wounds are basically how I describe it as anything that creates fear around your finances. Even if the tariffs were to go to zero, the damage has already been done, and a lot of other countries have started diversifying. I'm so glad you brought that up. This is the first time I've talked about this in any of the interviews. No one's asked me this question.
When we look at the back end of all the systems, the vast majority of those that listen to this podcast aren't yet subscribed. It would mean the world to me if you could subscribe today. That allows us to reach more people, the podcast grows, in turn allowing us to bring even bigger guests to you. I appreciate you for being here. Thank you so much. Well, welcome back to the show, everybody. You are in for a treat today. Bernadette Joy is here with us, and Bernadette paid off $300,000 in debt in just 3 years. Unheard of, right? You know, I'm very passionate about finding people who've actually walked their walk and teaches it. So excited to have this conversation with Bernadette. She's a nationally recognized personal finance expert, entrepreneur, and educator, passionate about helping people achieve financial independence. As the founder of Crush Your Money Goals, she has helped thousands of professionals and business owners eliminate debt, grow wealth, and build personal financial confidence through her courses, workshops, coaching programs, and her book. Bernadette, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I know you are everywhere promoting your book right now, and I am so thankful and grateful that you decided to be here with us today. So I know you're from New York. I'm not from New York, but I believe in getting right to it and giving people the value that they came here for. Big topic right now: tariffs,
Oh, yeah.
inflation. Can you give us, I know you've been talking a lot about this recently. Can you give us your thoughts on what's going to happen and what should we be doing right now?
Yes. So I just wrote an article about this in Bankrate, and the title of it was "The Economy Feels Off," like the vibes are off. And even I was just having this conversation with a client right before this conversation was that even if the administration were just to say, "You know what, we messed up or whatever, we're back to zero, like we're going to take back everything," the damage has already been done. If you actually follow news internationally, the rhetoric outside of the US is very different from what we're getting told here in the US, and the other countries have already started to diversify and started to make other plans. And so what that means for us in the US is that we will, regardless, we're going to see prices continue to rise. We're looking at like 15 to 20% across a lot of different areas, particularly everyday expenses like clothing and food and cars and things like that. And so personally, what I've been telling my clients is that right now we just have to go back to basics. We have to go back to basics, as in we got to stack cash and make sure that we have enough cash on hand, especially if you're someone who was potentially relying on some of your investments to withdraw in the next couple of years. You might not be able to do that without taking a loss. So you need to stack your cash now. We absolutely, absolutely need to pay off all of our credit card debt more so than ever before, specifically because if we put 15 and 20% increase on prices on top of a 20% interest rate that your average credit card is charging you, that is a recipe for cash flow challenges. And so really focusing on people paying down their credit cards is hugely important. Even if the tariffs were to go to zero today, like I said, the damage has already been done, and a lot of other countries have started diversifying and looking for other markets outside of the US. And so we're going to see increases no matter what. That's what's happening. And so I'm telling people to do the basics of what you need to do in personal finance. And what I love about personal finance is that if you're doing the basic foundational stuff, you should be good in good times and in bad. And so that's, paying down your consumer debt, particularly your credit cards, making sure that you are not adding a 20% interest rate on top of 15 to 20% increases in prices, making sure that you have cash stacked in the form of your normal contingency fund, your emergency funds. But also, if you're someone like me, I actually was planning to retire this year. And and so it's a little bit scary when you're planning to retire and then you see your retirement funds just starting to tank. And so the only reason that I'm not personally stressed out about it is because I have cash reserves on hand to be able to withdraw from, while my investments have time to recover. And then the other thing I'm telling people right now is to make sure, if you haven't already, been planning your monthly budget and adjusting, doing some projections of what your budget might look like if you do see increases in certain things that you rely on day to day.
Sure, sure. Let's talk about those a little bit more in depth. So I just took my parents to the beach for their 50th anniversary. As I was laying by the pool and had all this time on my hands, my dad's like, "Well, coffee's going to go up." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, you're right." And then he's like, "Toilet paper." And so I sat there and I got on Amazon and I just started like loading up on everything before the prices went up. So
Mhm.
is that a good idea? Am I contributing to something unfortunate for the economy? Like, are you encouraging people to stock up on things that could potentially take a rise? Like you said, the
Yeah.
consumables and the clothing.
What I will say is I don't want people to do like the, COVID pandemic, like stacking up on toilet paper kind of situation. But I am telling my clients that if there are any particular things that are imported that you do want to keep in your kind of day-to-day routine, then I would recommend that you stock up at least for the next couple of months if you have the cash funds to do that. Obviously, don't get into credit card debt or deplete your other savings to go buy toilet paper, for example. But I explain this to a lot of my clients as an example. Like, I'm Asian American and Filipino, and so a lot of the things that are staples in my like everyday cooking, like sesame oil and like things that are imported. Like, I drink matcha every day. I don't drink coffee. I drink matcha every day. That is absolutely imported. Those will rise. And so to the extent that I have this space in my cupboards to keep that, then I will keep a couple of extra, matcha stacks, for example, on hand so that I don't feel like I'm missing out, down the line. So I think there are certain things. And the only other thing that also been telling people is that if you have an imported car, that's something. If you expect to have any repairs in the near future, you might wanna start saving up for that or getting ahead of those repairs because, the cars are gonna be one of those areas that we will see an uptick in prices too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm going to New York this next week and the week after I'm scheduled to get new brakes on my Audi. And I'm so grateful that last time I was there and we scheduled this, they're like, "Well, you got to pay before we got to order the parts in advance." I'm like, "Just do it now."
Just do
I
it
know it's in a
now.
couple months. Just do it now. So I'm like, "Thank goodness they ordered those before any of this hit because it's a real thing and it's question mark." So, can you talk a little bit about your strategies on credit card debt? I heard you say pay your, I don't know where I had heard it. I'd been following you for a long time, but I heard this little snippet as you do, and you just hear exactly what you need to about paying your credit cards every single week. And I started
Mhm.
doing that a few months ago, and it's like it's a life changer, a game changer in having the right optics for what's really going on.
Yeah, yeah. So that's probably my biggest thing that people catch on. It's a small change, but it makes a really, really big difference. And what I've learned from coaching so many people is that people, even if you are someone who doesn't have credit card debt and you pay off your credit cards every month. I live in Charlotte. There's a lot of people who work in financial services, and then they're like, "Oh, I'm good because I pay off my credit cards every month." But if you really think about it, some of that debt is now 30 days old when you pay your credit cards because if you bought something at the beginning of your credit card cycle, then that's been sitting around for almost a month at that point. And so what I figured out with a lot of my clients is that the reason they haven't been able to budget effectively is because they're still actually playing catch up from paying their credit cards quote unquote on time. So I had initially started to move all of my clients to, no matter when your credit card is due, just pay it off at the end of the month so that the beginning of the month when you do your budget, you have a clean slate and you know exactly how much cash you have on hand. But even then, I saw that people were still having a challenge doing budgeting. And so I moved all of my clients to pay their credit cards off weekly, basically every Friday, just go and check in, you know, clear out what balance you have there, and then you can go into the weekend being like, "All right, I know how much money I can splurge on wine or
Yeah.
whatever this weekend because I've cleared out my credit cards." And so not only does that help you really understand your cash flow, but it really helped my clients from like a guilt, like I can't spend money kind of perspective to say, "Oh, I know where my money is at. Whatever is in my bank account is truly what I have right now." And so I can plan more accordingly, and that has made a huge difference for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. I just the mental shift that it made for me, and again, having those optics is, and I'm not really a big budgeter, but it really just also it just helped me rein some things in and actually see what I had. And I know you talk about that in your book about just like the mindset shift of even paying cash or or using your debit card, checking account versus being on credit, putting things on
Mhm.
credit. Can you talk a little bit about the differences, that mindset, and what happens when people are paying, using credit card versus cash?
Yeah, yeah. So I have a psychology degree, and one of the principles that I've learned in psychology is that people are more likely to try to avoid pain than they are to pursue pleasure, and so what happens is when you are swiping your credit card, you don't really get a pain point like you do with a debit card or with paying cash, and
Yep.
so not that I'm saying that we want to try to have people like feel like purchases are more painful, but it does give us a little bit more pause when we physically see like cash like leaving our hands versus like swiping a card, and that's by design. And what I think is really important for people to know, and I love that you mentioned that you said that you're not a big budgeter. Neither am I, even though I'm like out here talking about budgeting and stuff all the time. People are often surprised that when I talk about budgeting, I spend 1 or 2 hours a month doing my budget and that's it. And that's because if you have the other habits in place of paying off your credit cards every week, trying to pay cash or using your debit wherever possible, and also making sure that you are doing your budget at the top of the month, then you actually don't have to do any tracking. People
Yeah.
are always really surprised that when I teach people budgeting, they're always like, "But then how do I know how much I spent?" I'm like, "Well, if you actually did everything the way that I tell you to do in budgeting, then you won't have to track because everything will just flow on its own." And that's a really big mental shift for a lot of people because people assume that budgeting is boring and it's tedious because the way that they budget is just tracking what's already been spent versus being forward looking.
Yeah, yeah. It feels very constricting when you think about budgeting and tracking everything. But like you said, if you have the systems in place and it's like, okay, I just follow this system, then everything really falls into play and it becomes it's very fluid. And but I find, having coached all kinds of people for the past 20 plus years in corporate America and outside of corporate America, sometimes people, this topic is so big, like they don't even open the statements. They don't even open. So do you have any advice or do you have any tactics or strategies, or is it just a matter of people have to get to a point of pain or motivation before they do it? Because some people just literally, like, I'll teach a vision board event and I'll say, listen, like whatever you're going to focus on this year, but recognize that if there's that thing that's got your attention that's sucking all this energy out of you, like why don't we just open the credit card statements, and like why don't we just get our finances in order? And there's always all this nervous laughter, and you know that it's real, like that is knowing, telling laughter. But I don't know,
Mhm.
how do you get them to do that?
Yeah, so, crush your money goals. The reason it's called that is because crush spells out the acronym that I walk people through. And so the first letter in crush stands for curate your accounts. And that's where I start all my clients off. And this is what I do with a lot of people who give you that like nervous laughter is we have to bite the bullet from the beginning to say, let's get all of your accounts together in one tool to know exactly where you're at. And that is usually such a big to do for a lot of people because they've never really actually organized their finances in a way that they could see it all in one place. I happen to use a tool called Monarch Money, but there's plenty of other like tools that you can track your net
Is
worth.
that just, is that an app? Is that
It's an app, yeah, it's
okay?
an app, and it's also, I actually prefer the desktop version,
Uh-huh.
and if people remember Mint went away a couple of years ago, and so I've shifted all my clients to Monarch Money, and why I really like it is because you can actually rename the accounts to things that are a lot more fun, so instead of saying it, credit card ending in 0256 or whatever, it's, like, oh, fun money or, vacation funds or, like, mine is called, like, Babe in Bali because that's where I wanna go next, and so
I love it.
what so, where I've been able to shift people on that is once we get all your finances, all your accounts into one view like that, I make them go line by line and rename the accounts what their actual intent of it is, and in a way that actually resonates with them. So that one exercise, it's like it's basically doing a vision board for your finances. But when that one exercise, I tell people, if you're looking at that organization of your accounts and you're not smiling, then you're not doing it right. Then you haven't named it
Mm,
right. You haven't
okay.
really connected it to what it means in your life. And I think I can, I appreciate what you do on the sense of, like things like doing the vision boards and stuff, is that people don't often have a vision for their finances. So that's why they get this nervous laughter, because they think of this money as this thing that they have to conquer, versus like, no, this money is a tool to help me achieve the dreams that I'm working on with people like you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for saying so. I believe in optics. I believe in is, the faster we can get to the truth, we can actually put a plan in place that's going to get you to the results. And if you're not willing to do that, then we're who knows if we're going to get there, right? Like who really knows? Because I don't know the truth, and you don't know your truth either. And so at some point, you're going to have to get real with yourself on what is there and what is not there. You talk a little bit about the different fears in your book. And there was one thing that you said that really stood out to me because I see it a lot in the coaching space. So you identified four different fears. Is that
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
um, and you talked about the fawning behavior, this people pleasing behavior. And I see that a lot with my group coaching clients where they try to be the best students possible. But when you dig in, they're not doing the work. Like they're not doing any of the stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that in your programs?
Yeah, so a lot of people know the other fears where there's fight and there's flight and there's freeze, but the one that I see most commonly as a coach is the fawn, right? Which is essentially in my groups it shows up like, Bernadette, you're such a great mentor and I love everything that you say and I read the whole book, but then we get into their meeting and I'm like, where's your monarch money? They're like, oh, I haven't done that. It's like, well, what? Wait, why? And I'm thinking the whole time, I'm like, you must have been doing all the work because you keep telling me how amazing the
I
program
used
is
to
and all
think
of that
so
stuff.
too. And now it's almost the opposite. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And where I think that comes from, particularly for, women, is, we've always been taught to, be agreeable and be likable and be supportive. And, to a certain extent to like avoid confrontation. And, but when I dig deeper into a lot of my clients, and I would say especially for women who come from like kind of different cultural backgrounds, is that actually was for a lot of women a survival mechanism,
Yeah.
right? Like basically like make yourself small so that you don't get attacked.
Yeah.
And it, because I had one particular client that made me really realize that that was what was going on there, was that she would just, even though she was dying inside, she would just keep telling everyone she's okay, she's fine, because, like in her culture, like you just like, you don't complain about being a mom, you don't complain about being a wife, you don't complain about anything. You're just supposed to be the one who is supposed to be everyone else's cheerleader. And I realized that that not only is is going to come to a head at some point, because you're not really addressing the fears and actually figuring out how to resolve the things that are going on there, but I've noticed that a lot of women start to become resentful because they're
Mm-hmm.
saying, they're, and I was that person at one point too, where I was just like, I always feel like I have to tell everyone else they're doing such a great job and that everyone else is doing amazing, but to myself, I'm like my own worst critic, and that can really harm us both, obviously from an emotional perspective, but financially, that is really detrimental, especially for a lot of women, to use that fawning to say, "Oh, everything's great, everything's fine. I'm doing fine all the time," when we're actually not fine. And not only are we not okay emotionally, but it's gonna eat at your finances in one way or another.
Yeah, thank you for saying all of that. You talk in your book. I love your background. I love that you're all about getting to the root cause. Let's get to the root. Let's fix the things so that we can all be happy and healthy and reach our goals. You talk about the difference between self-worth and self-esteem. Can you talk a little bit about that? I've never heard anybody define those two and the differences, and I love this.
So I was confused about this because one day my therapist years ago said to me, she was like, "You have a lot of self esteem and not a lot of self worth," and I was like, "What the heck does that? What?" I mean, to the point where it's like, "I hate you, and I'm just gonna find a new therapist. You're wrong about this." And when I kind of dug deeper, what she really meant by that was that self esteem is the best way I can describe this is like self-esteem is confidence built on other people's approval, and self-worth is confidence built on your own approval of yourself. And so
Mm.
I was very good at building self-esteem, meaning like I was good at creating a lot of like external accolades that people could tell me that I was doing a good job. And that's starting off as a kid. Like you get good grades, you win the basketball game, you do all the things that you're supposed to do to be like star kid, and you build a lot of self-esteem. But did I actually believe, that I was worthy? Did I actually believe that I was someone that, it was deserving of love? The answer was probably not for most of my life, not until probably the last 5 years. So, what I figured out with finances is that there's also that correlation in finances where people are building a lot of their finances based off self-esteem and not self-worth. So, kind of a prime
Yeah.
example I had with a client just again before this, I had a different client I was talking to today, and there's this idea of like renting versus home ownership. Like a lot of people buy homes because like that's a self-esteem thing. Like society tells us like you're supposed to be a homeowner. That's how you show you're successful. The bigger the house, right? Like the more successful you are. But I have a lot of clients who actually don't like maintaining a house, don't like having a lawn, don't want to do those chores. And also a lot of clients who are literally house poor. They put all their money into their houses and they don't have enough cash flow to run the rest of their lives. And so unpacking that self-esteem, saying like, "Well, why did you buy a home? Was it for self-esteem or was it for self-worth? Which one was it?" A lot of times it's for self-esteem, and so then we have to address, well, what would actually make you feel worthy and loved? And it's usually for a lot of my clients, it's not about having a big house. It's actually about building relationships with the people that you live in in the house. It's about having a career that's more fulfilling for you. And so that's like a really, I'm so glad you brought that up. This is the first time I've talked about this in any of the interviews I've done around the book. No one's asked me this question.
Yeah.
And that is a very big distinction that I think a lot of people get confused and conflate.
Yeah, yeah, and if you're comfortable, it's okay if you're not. I think when I think of a Filipino woman, honestly, I think of like the strongest, hardest worker I have ever met in my life. Every single one of them, I'm like, oh my gosh, like what you just said of like everything's fine, don't worry about it, I got it. She's carrying like 6 kids on her back, 4 jobs, cooking dinner, grabbing. I mean, it's just like I think of an octopus, right, with like 16 legs, not even eight. Do you feel like your upbringing helped you understand this concept more and the transition that you had to make?
I think my upbringing was what caused the was actually what caused the dissonance in that I thought that the more accolades that I got and I thought the more that I accomplished that people would love me more. Like that's really and a lot of immigrant cultures are kind of based on this achievement idea, right? And I think and I would say most Americans I think are kind of fall into that thing of just like, okay, well, if I have a great job and have a great job, a title, and I have a beautiful house and all that stuff, then people will really like me. That's a lot of where that comes from. And it took me it wasn't until, interestingly, a couple of years ago, I decided to sell my paid off house and go back to renting. And my everyone in my life was like, "What is going on? Like, what? Why would you do that? Like, that doesn't make any sense." Because you could even make the argument, "Oh, if I had a big mortgage and I was house poor, like, what, like that would make sense to sell a house." But I was paid off, and I really recognized at that moment when I was getting all this feedback from people of just like, "Why are you doing this?" And they didn't understand it, that I realized, wow, so much of how I make choices in my finances was based on what other people would think.
Yeah.
And that is a very Filipino, kind of cultural thing. It's like a very collectivist, society. So it's like what your worth is dependent on the people around you and what they think about you. And so it took me a lot of I'm still working through it, to be
Was
honest. I
that
haven't
like
figured it
a
out.
was that just like a thing that you picked up in the culture, or was that like a spoken word that you have to be agreeable, you have to be a certain way, you're a woman of color, like,
It
was
was
it
it was
spoken?
it it was said. I mean, my father literally said to me one day, he's like, "If you keep acting this way," and by this way, he meant like I was just very out loud and outspoken. He said, "No one's gonna wanna marry you." Like, I remember my dad saying those words verbatim. Like, he's like, "You're too loud." Like, "You're too like, have too many opinions." And what I think is also was implicit was that, Philippines is very, like, Catholic um, nation. And so every Sunday I would go to church and the moms would literally be standing outside the church, kind of like comparing like what the kids did that week. It's like, oh, my kid won this award this week, and my kid did this, like, and so you pick up these cues as a
Yeah.
kid to say, well, oh, all the moms are
Mm.
talking about who's the best kid,
Yeah.
essentially, and so you want to try to be the best kid. And so that's a lot of things that a lot of people don't realize, that when I do financial coaching, we uncover a lot of those things because it's so intertwined with how you spend your money.
Yeah. Would you say that that's like when you talk about money wounds, would that be a money wound, or what would an example of a money wound be?
So money wounds are basically how I describe it as anything that creates fear around your finances. And so absolutely money wounds can be seeing your parents fight about money. It can be wanting to be the best kid and not feeling like you're ever good enough. More recently, a money wound that we don't often talk about is, in this current economy, a lot of people are worried about layoffs. And a lot of my clients, I had a client who came to me this past weekend. She said, she got laid off from her job, and she said, "I don't know, like, I've been laid off before, but for some reason I'm just feeling like really weird and stuff." And I'm like, "Because that is an actual trauma that
Yeah.
occurred to you. Like someone just like pulled the rug out from underneath you." And so of course you're going to feel apprehensive about spending money, or, worrying about what your future is going to look like. And one money wound that's coming up, very pertinent in today's news, is people who are old enough to have remembered the 2008 recession. People are having money wounds from 2008 and wondering if we're going to go through another cycle like that now. And so it's been interesting to me, for example, to work with clients who are now in their 50s and 60s, asking me all these questions about retirement and whether or not they're going to be okay, because they saw, their bosses at the time, or their older coworkers not being able to retire or getting laid off. And so there's a lot of things one of the reasons that I became a personal finance coach versus a financial advisor is financial advisors generally are not trained or are not incentivized to care about people's money wounds when they're looking at their finances. And as a coach, I employ my psychology degree just as much as I do my finance background.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because it's we're just putting a band-aid on the whole thing anyway. And people are going to still carry all that stress with them. And I feel like that's I spent 15 years in the medical device world, working very closely alongside surgeons and physicians. And the number one thing that brought people in the doctor's office was financial stress. That's the number one reason that they were there, and they had all of the whatever issues that were there, including emergencies, were because of financial stress. And if you can't get to the bottom of it and start to help people and give them the tools, then what are we really doing?
Yeah, and I think the unfortunate thing that I'm seeing now though too is it's becoming cyclical, in that I have a lot of clients who have had kind of chronic conditions pop up because of financial stress, and then because of the way our insurance is designed, is that now they're having medical bills or medical debt that they're having to figure out how to pay for things. And I've often unfortunately I also had to have a lot of conversations with the clients who right now truly cannot afford some of the medical things that they need to take care of. And so I'm really glad that we're having conversations like this to help people understand that while it sounds very grim, and sometimes I can be very realistic and sometimes even pessimistic about kind of like the state of the world. The reason I wrote Crush Your Money Goals and the reason that I continue to do what I do is because every day I get to interact with people who are taking control of their habits
Yeah.
and taking control of what they have the ability to exercise any sort of discernment around, and focusing on those things versus the things that you can't control. Like you said, you don't follow the news that often. It's actually, I wish that I could also not follow the news as often, except it's like my day job
Yeah.
to be a journalist. But I'm like you, like if I didn't have to, then I would just spend my time focusing on the people and the things that I can, exercise some sort of control over.
Do you feel like there's another level to reach, but you haven't been able to unlock the combination? Do you feel like on paper you've reached success, but something still feels off inside of you? You might describe it as feeling stuck or restless. Do you find yourself wanting to make a big change somewhere in your life, but you're unsure what steps to take and could also use some support in the process of moving gracefully in the direction your soul is calling you? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, my 12-week proprietary Unleash program may just be for you. If you'd like to learn more, head over to www.unleashwithchristy.com, answer a couple of questions, and book a discovery call with me. Keep rising, my friends. You are so much closer than you think. Yeah, I mean, I've taken it to the extremes to the point. I remember several years ago when I was still in corporate America, I left. This is going to make me sound like such a blonde, but I left Charlotte and it was like a foggy morning, and I drove to South Carolina to work and then came back, and it's like 4:30 and I had my last conference call, and I was like thinking out loud on this conference call, and I was like, man, that's so weird. And my boss was on, we're waiting for other people to get on, and he's like, what's so weird? And I'm like, I left this morning, it was foggy, and I'm like, and it's still foggy. And I'm like, it's that's just so odd to me that it's 4:30 and it's foggy. And he's like, you really don't follow the news, do you? And that was when the forest fires were like an hour outside of Charlotte. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not fog, it's smoke. So I do try to check in a little bit more often to make sure that the money's okay and that things are okay. But I love that, that you really focus on putting a plan in place. What I find in life is that, a lot of people come to me because they want to leave corporate America too. Like me, they design a life that they don't want to show up for anymore. And they're like, oh my gosh, how do I even begin to unwind? Whether it's a relationship, it's conversations with families, it's putting boundaries in place with our parents, it's leaving corporate America. They may be stretched paycheck to paycheck because they built a life right up against that wall. And they're like, man, and they're stressed to the max. And just putting the plan together, it's amazing to see that if we schedule time to plan and just take these little tiny steps, not only does it help their stress, but it helps their situation because they're moving forward towards the thing. And so it's amazing to me how simple money management tips, just like paying your credit card off every single week and seeing everything and putting a plan together, can completely change absolutely everything.
Yeah, yeah. The R in crush, it stands for reverse into independence. And it's probably my favorite exercise to do with people in order to get them to plan is, there's a very simple financial planning rule, which basically says that, if you have 25 times your annual expenses saved in investments, then you can theoretically retire and not run out of money. And most people don't know that rule. Two, people have
25 times your expenses
25
saved.
times your annual expenses put
Okay.
into kind of traditional investing
At
traditional
what percent?
investing.
Is there a percentage? Does it matter?
It's the model assumes that it's growing at around like 10% with a 4% inflation rate. Like that's like there's if you really want to nerd out about it, it's called the Trinity study. And it's a kind of it's a baseline rule for it's not perfect, but it's a starting point. And the reason I use that is because once people calculate, first it forces people to calculate what their actual annual expenses are and what really matters to them and say, well, do I really need, certain expenses that I've come to just like rely upon, right? And then the other so what ends up happening is that two things happen. Either people realize they're not where they need to be in order to achieve that number. Like the habits that they're doing right now is not going to get them there. Or the more interesting thing, and probably maybe some of the people that you come across, Christy, are people who've made significant amount of money. They're actually already there, and they're like, "Why am I doing this still?" And
Yeah.
I've had several clients like that who will make, a ton who make really, really nice money, and they have a lot of so I had a corporate client in Charlotte. She makes, multi six figures in her day job, and basically coming to me saying that she wants to do what I did, leave my corporate job and, start a business that was very mission oriented. And we ran the numbers for her, and I figured out she had enough money to leave her job, and she actually didn't have to work if she chose not to. And no one's ever told her that before, first of all. And so then the question then became like, so we've always been using money and making more money as a crutch as to, well, I need to keep doing this because if I stop working, then I won't have enough money. And so what I think is those cases are they're very interesting to me, where I've actually run into more people who just have never really had a plan for that. The plan was always to just keep working until 65 or whatever. But I've run into so many people who actually could retire, but the reason they don't retire is because they're afraid, because they don't know what they would be doing if they didn't work. And that's where people like you are so helpful in these plans to say, hey, you've never stopped to actually envision what your life would look like if you weren't at this job. Like, let's go do that now. And you can start putting a plan around what life looks like outside of just being productive all the time and, just trying to support late stage capitalism, instead saying like, "Hey, I might want to go do something that's completely different and I might actually be okay." And so those are my favorite cases to work on, the people who have made a lot of money in their careers, realizing this ain't it and they want to have a different purpose in life, but to actually run the numbers alongside the dream planning, is, like, really powerful.
Yeah, you're opening a door that I didn't even think that sometimes I just intuitively know, like, I need to have a conversation with her. I want to share some things, but what's coming up for me right now, several things. So we talk about just the way that we're wired and the way that we're brought up. And I had to overcome a lot of things as well. We saved every penny. I was chasing financial freedom. That was the lion that was on my back. And I made all my decisions based off of that. And then I reached financial freedom and I'm like, oh shit, I forgot about peace and joy and happiness too, right? Like
Mhm.
whoa, okay, I'm very one dimensional. I got this one thing. But then explaining that to my family that, I want to leave. And it's like, well, what are you going to do for insurance? Well, what about the job? And what about the security? And everybody's very, very concerned. And so then you realize, like, okay, I can't talk to you guys. I can't even share what I'm doing because you're freaking me out and you're worried about what everybody else thinks. And I used to be worried about what everybody else thinks because you taught me to worry about what everybody else thinks. Like, even just hearing my brother and I get in a fight in the backyard, it's like, stop doing that. What are the neighbors going to think? And I'm like,
That's
well, the
right.
neighbors should think that I finally stuck up for myself and I pushed them back, or whatever it is. But that wiring was there. And I say, I've had to do a lot of work, and so do all my people. But there's a gal who's going to join my next round. I have a 12-week unleash program, and it's really the first step is alignment. It's getting people in alignment with who they are, because like me, I find that the majority are living somebody else's definition of success. And we have these silly rules in place that I have to have a house. Well, for what reason? Well, it makes me look a certain way because I don't rent, I own. And then I have whatever, I have capital in here. And like you, I sold my house and I live in a full service building now, and I wanted to live like I was living in a hotel. That was like the main reason I did it, but I had to get over that hump of like, what are people going to think of me not being a homeowner anymore? Do I need to like show them my portfolio and make it seem like, crazy, the stuff that we do? But this particular person wants to leave corporate as well.
Mhm.
I know she has the money. So I invited her to come hang out for a couple hours. We went for a walk. I was just helping her. And I purposely brought her up to my place. And I said, hey, guess what? I don't own this place. You can't even buy in this building anymore. And it gave her permission. The fact that I was doing it gave her permission and line of sight that, oh. And so to think, my whole point in saying that is there, this podcast is keep rising. You're so much closer than you think. And I think so many people are so much closer. So we should talk after this, because I think getting the numbers and running the numbers and showing people that you're okay, it really is just a mindset shift to go like, well, you could have the life that you wanted if you were okay with not just continuing to stack the cash right now at a job that you hate.
Mhm, mhm. And I
Yeah.
also think that people underestimate the power of some small changes that would change the trajectory of their budgets, even if they didn't have enough money stacked, like, in net worth right now.
Can you
For
give us an
example.
example?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things that I, have come across with my clients is just by deciding to pay off their car frees up enough cash in their budgets to potentially, like, take a step back in their career or to be able to redeploy those funds towards, something else that they really enjoy, and because the average car payment right now is, like, between, like, $600 and $700 a month because of, like, the interest rates and
Crazy.
stuff, like, that's a lot of money for, that's a big portion of a lot of people's budgets, and I've had a lot of clients, especially, again, the ones who make good money, they're like, "Well, because all my peers drive a really nice car, so I have to drive a nice car." So we're talking like $1,100 car payments. And like such a mental shift to say, "Hey, you have two options. You can pay off the car or you can like downgrade to a different car and that would free up this much more cash and you could go do something else." People that mental hump over, like, the status of a car is very interesting, but once all of my clients who've done it, like, regret that they didn't do it sooner. So I had,
Yeah.
someone who read the book and they, sent me an email and they just said, "Hey, I just wanna let you know that I decided after reading your book that I decided to pay off my car, and it wasn't like I was paying a lot on interest in the car because it was a low rate, but the amount of money that I was paying towards my car, I'm putting it towards my house instead." And she said, "I'm running the calculator now, and I'm gonna be able to pay off my house, like, 5 years sooner, which means that I could probably retire 5 years sooner, just from that one choice."
Yeah.
So, I really am excited. If you can't tell, I get excited about these things because
Me
such
too.
small little tweaks in your money planning can change the trajectory of, like, how many more years you have in your life to not just retire, but go do something more meaningful.
Yeah, yeah, and like everything changed for me when I interviewed a death doula on my podcast, and I was like, "Hey, what?" Like how many have you been on the journey with? And she said over 1,000. And I'm like,
Wow.
okay, I want to know, like, what's everybody thinking? Is there any consistencies? Like, what at the end? And she's like, yeah, of course, it's regret. Regret's number one. And I said, regret. And why didn't they do the thing? And she said, they didn't. The number one reason why people don't do the thing is the fear of what other people are going to think. And I'm like, oh my gosh, seriously, like this whole thing could end for all of us tomorrow. Time we have no idea. And to sit here and think that we're running off of these outdated rules that our family saves, so we should save, or funds not, we shouldn't be having fun, or we shouldn't enjoy luxurious things. We know at the end of the day what's best for us. It's just that we have to connect to that and believe in that and move forward with that.
I love that.
Yeah, I'm so excited about about everything, all the work that you do. I'm very excited to introduce you to my network. Is any debt good in your mind? Is leveraging debt, do you believe in leveraging debt? Do you believe in like, hey, my let's say my car payment, I borrowed that money at 4% and I'm earning 8% over here, does it still make sense to pay this off?
Yeah, I get that a lot. That in that particular scenario, I hate because a lot of people are trying to like kind of game the system and like
Yeah.
and they're running the numbers based off of the percentages, not off the actual dollars. So
Okay.
I
So help
I
me
always
understand that. What's
yeah,
that mean?
so I'll give you kind of an example that I get very frequently with business owners is a lot of business owners will put, will get like low interest loans, right, to start off their business. Um, and what I found is I'm being a little facetious here, but like I noticed that when you use debt as a first resort, then you tend to not make choices that are going to have like a longer tail like success rate. So like a kind of silly example, I'm not gonna say it's silly, but a lot of female business owners that I coach, the first things that they wanna go do is build a website and get some swag with their, like and get a pretty logo.
You're like, "No,
And
you need sales."
yeah, you need money.
You
Yeah,
need
right?
sales.
I knew that you would agree with me on this, right? And
Yeah, you
so
need sales.
and to the point where they're actually taking out loans or putting it on credit cards to, like, go hire a graphic designer for, like, 10K to have a pretty logo, and I'm like, "But you don't even have a product. You don't even have a service. What are you talking about?"
What do
And
you
so
do?
yeah, exactly. I'm like, "You don't even know what you do. What are you gonna put on this website? There's no copy to put on the website because you don't do anything," right? And so that's why I'm not a big fan of like using debts as leverage because they're hearing from other business coaches, oh, like, oh, but if you're it's good debt, business debt is good debt because you're building a business, or like if you're using debt to buy like certain assets. But if you don't have a plan on how to get the money back, and
Yeah,
then especially if you're putting it on a credit card, which is again 20% average interest rate, to me that's not a good investment. And this is, I'm biased in the sense of I've been able to build, two businesses completely debt free. One of them was a brick and mortar retail store, and I was able to do that without taking out any debt because I made incremental investments over time using cash flow. But most people are not patient enough to like wait to have the cash and build slowly. And so what I think has been very interesting for me now is that a lot of people are only finding out about me now, like this year because of the book, because it came out. But people are shocked to know that I've been at this for 10 years and I've been building very slowly. But now, like, my trajectory for my business has been like, "Duh-duh-duh-duh," but then it's like shooting up now.
yeah, which is
Uh,
the classic story, right? People just
mhm.
don't they don't yeah, they think that you just were an overnight success.
Yeah, and what's been interesting for me is that I went to, a networking event here in Charlotte, one that I haven't been to in, like, 8 years since I was running my last business, and, uh, it was kind of like a reminder to me of just, like, a lot of times, like, I would get very down on myself because I'm like, "Oh, I'm not growing as fast as the other people," a lot of other people who are taking out debt in order to grow their businesses. I came back to this event and they were all like so surprised at like the trajectory of my business from where it was 8 years ago. And a lot of them were kind of saying the same, and that's not shade or that's not knocking their businesses. It's just because they started off with such a high amount of debt to grow those businesses, they're all their business decisions is how to like pay it off. Whereas my decisions as a business owner has been how to grow because debt is not a concern of mine on mine. So I can take a lot more risk than some other people who have debt payments like saddling them.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's and again, it's why one of the many reasons I admire your work is you understand the concepts and the psychology behind each person as well. And it's like it's like this false persona of going like, okay, well, all right, I'm supposed to take out this debt, but are you really tracking your numbers? Do you really understand what's happening in your business? No, because you're just used to having this 30 or 50 or $100,000 rotational debt. You don't know what's interest rate, you don't know what is real. But if you're running everything off of cash, you know every single transaction, and you make decisions differently of like, okay, am I just going to like fill this course just to have numbers, or am I going to fill this course to have with intentional buyers that want to change their life, that are going to actually give me testimonials that will help me grow. I mean, it's just that there's so much in everything that you said. I completely understand it, and you're not throwing shade. It's just a matter of I believe that you're showing like what the truth is behind your pathway versus other people's pathway. And if you're going to take on debt, be very intentional of what that debt is intended for.
And I think it's a really important conversation. It's people are a lot more apt to have this conversation with me now than maybe a couple years ago, because if you think about where we are in the current economy with tariffs and you know why this is all happening, it's because the US is in a significant amount of debt that we
Yeah.
cannot get out of.
Yeah.
That's why all this crazy is happening right now. It's
I
because of
know.
debt.
A
And
course
so
correction.
it's course correction. And so similarly, and I think you can appreciate this as like a fellow kind of business owner, is, I started building my course and my program back in like 2019. And again, very slow growth, but this year I'll reach my kind of like first $1 million in revenue. And people are like, oh, well, how did you do that?
Congratulations.
Thank you. But then my answer to them is like, well, I've been debt free since 2019, and so the decisions I've made as a business owner just looks very different. Like you just have a different type of energy when you know you don't owe anyone any money.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
the choices that I've made are ones that took a little bit longer to ramp up, but because I took longer on them, I feel very confident in the programs that I'm able to offer because they're tested, and I didn't have to charge people like a lot of money in the beginning because I was able to take more time to actually like vet out the things that I was doing. And now, and someone asked me like, how did you get, your book on Oprah, to be like, on Oprah's list or whatever? And I'm like, because I took 10 years to write this
Yeah.
this book, because like it works. That's why, but because other people will churn out like churn something out and be like, "Oh yeah, and we're ready to charge people like $20,000 for this thing that I haven't tested yet." And and so I'm really excited for more and more women to hear your messaging and these types of conversations to say, "Hey, we can build great businesses. We don't have to build them on the models that we were taught, i.e. like taking out a lot of debt, like having to have investors. Like you can build a great business, but it does take a little bit more time."
Yeah, well, you just said something that's really, really helpful. I think we should stop on it for a second too. And what I hear from you, and I want you to validate, but it's my own truth as well, is when you take the time and you take all those reps. Like by the time you pitch Oprah Daylight, like your posture is so different because you know this works, and that is worth its weight in gold. And I don't think people realize and recognize that is a big piece of selling. And that's a big piece of people that rise and come right back down, and people that rise and they just keep rising and rising and rising. And that's what you've done, and that's what you're going to continue to do because you've put in the reps and your posture says it, like this works. And not only have you done it for yourself, but you've walked through and seen, oh my gosh, probably hundreds of scenarios, and you learn and you tweak, and we're never done. But this thing is a well-oiled machine that gets
Thank
results.
you. Well,
Yeah.
and I will forewarn though is that where I'm up against now, which has been very interesting, is I have started to get a lot more feedback. People look at it as either confidence or I've even been told I got feedback recently that someone said that they felt I was condescending, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like I wonder why they would feel that way. And I think part of it is because one, I don't think people are used to women being this confident in
Yeah.
something, and they're like thinking, oh, she's just confident in her own abilities. And what people don't understand is like, no, I've been doing this for 10 years. That I'm
Yeah.
confident because I know it works because I've tried it like 1,000 times. So that's why I may sound as matter of fact as I do because I've actually have like the research to back it up. But I also think that I'm receiving what you're saying. One of the hurdles that I'm coming up with personally right now, we were just talking about this before we started recording, was that I just came back from this speaking engagement and I was told by one of the attendees, they're like, "Oh, you're the best speaker here." And I used to take that as a compliment, and I'm starting to realize that that's actually probably not a great thing, that I'm speaking at places where I'm the best speaker there. I need to like level up and to go to places where I'm the worst speaker so that I can get better. And so yes, we can be on the rise, but I still struggle regularly with the fact that, like, the places that got me here up until this point, they feel comfortable now. And so I need to go to places now where the people who I'm around, I'm like, "Ooh, they're doing stuff that I've never done before." And that's different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's I think that that's the high achiever is it's like we're constantly assessing and reassessing and going, okay, all right, now I'm at the top of these rooms, and now I have to go. Now I have to, get in these other rooms that are going to help me grow even more. And that's a psychology thing. That's in your veins. It's never going to change. And I love that you're aware of it and you're not just sitting still with where you are. Another thing that you're very open about, and I just love that you're you. I love that. I know what it's like to step out on the path, and then people think that you've crossed some finish line, and in their eyes you've moved up, but in your eyes you're just trying to get better and try to get better, and then people treat you a certain way and start treating you differently. You put up a post, it may have been today, I don't know if it was on LinkedIn, but you said you sold 4,742 copies so far just since December of this book. And you found this stat out the same week that you received feedback from a person that you've never met that they didn't like the way that you speak again. And that, you got emails from readers of the book, one of which who paid off a car and is now paying extra towards their mortgage to retire faster. Another who implemented the cash flow cushion and isn't stressed about paying his bills anymore. But you're the type of person that this negative feedback, you were taught as a woman of color that you have to be liked. So that people pleasing has been a piece of your persona and your job. You're learning that you can't let other people who don't know you bother you anymore or get in your way of this mission. And I just have to acknowledge you and thank you for sharing your truth, because this is what it looks like. This is what success really looks like. People will blow you away in the way that their insecurities come out and they attack. And then it brings up our shit that we've worked on for a long period of time. So I just have to acknowledge you for being so honest. This is what the world needs to see. Is
Thank
that this
you.
is and I hope you continue and you just let these people fall to the wayside, because that is just their shit. And I know you know that, but it's easier said than done. It
Thank
really is,
you.
because sometimes those come in the moment when we don't need them.
Yeah, yeah, I will receive that. I'm actually like I feel like I'm getting like little goosebumps from you saying that because I I need to hear that sometimes, and I had a big aha moment, and I posted on social media this past year that I turned 40, and my big goal this year was not business or financial, it was like learning how to swim. Cuz I never knew how to swim, and so I took swimming lessons at our local rec center here, and it came to a head where I had a YouTube video that was starting to kind of get a lot more traction than it normally would, and it was all like negative comments. It was all these like men who were just like, "You don't know what you're talking about, and you're dumb," and blah 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 blah. Like, and I was talking to my YouTube person. I said, whatever title or thumbnail that caused people to like react this way, like we gotta fix it. Cause he's like, but it's engagement. I'm like, I don't care if it's engagement. Like, I will not tolerate people like speaking to me this way. And where it came to a head to me that day was that I was late to my swim lesson because I was so stressed out about this thing. And I was like, this is so dumb. I can't believe that I am
Yeah.
letting my personal goal of learning how to save my own life in the water. I told him, I said, hey, I'm now late to my swim lesson, which is my one goal this year because of these dumb trolls. So like I'm not gonna invite that kind of energy. And that day, I this was back in January of this year. I was like, I will never let that type of negativity detract me from these types of goals again. But it took me sitting in the rec center talking to my YouTube person, realizing I'm late to this thing that actually really mattered to me, to realize, wow, that's how much I let people pleasing get to me, that it's actually interfering
Yeah.
with, my personal growth. And so I'm just sharing that as a kind of visual story for all of us women here. It's like we think that even for someone like me who I thought that I was over the people pleasing, that day I realized, oh no, I'm not over it yet. I still gotta I still gotta work on it. So it is a process and I really appreciate you acknowledging that.
Yeah, no, you're a real person, and we're all real people, and we have the tactics and the strategies, and we're tested, and we have to continue to show up for them. And I just appreciate that you're vulnerable enough and you're confident enough to share all of that, because I social media is such a beautiful thing in the sense where I mean you can get like you can go so much faster. You can do in 2 years what would take you 15 years to get the knowledge and be able to implement it and reach out to people and talk to people and get clients. But also the comparison, and people put up only what they want you to see and they don't show the other stuff, and then you're taught not to put the other stuff up. And so people need to see and hear that that nobody is immune to this. This stuff happens to all of us, and some days we're good at at tolerating it, and other times it gets to us too. And it's more of like, what do we do in those situations? And sometimes, like yours, that particular example. Thank you for sharing. It's a realization to go, okay, you know what? Enough is enough. Like enough is enough. And I hear you. I see you. Like we're not doing this anymore. um, it's unfortunate because hurt people hurt people. They really do. And I've had to learn in the coaching space too. Sometimes I've let people go because I'm like, you know what, you're just, I can't, this is too dangerous and destructive for you to be around people that may be a step ahead of you. And you need to see this as a beautiful thing, not as easier said than done on social media though, because those freaking trolls just, put up fake whatever
Mhm.
and they go at it.
Yeah, well, the fun side of it is, I've said this, I have another client who's also, like, in the kind of personal finance, social media space, and, I was joking with her because she said to me one day, she realized, "I don't have any haters on my social media," and she's like, "I'm starting to think that that might be a bad thing because that means I'm not actually saying what I wanna say. I'm being very, like,
I think so too.
vanilla."
I agree. I,
Yeah.
I think so too. I think it's a sign that you're not being your like if you can be louder and you can be more of yourself. Yeah, she's probably
Mhm.
filtered, too filtered.
Yeah, and so, we were as part of our coaching, she actually started putting out more stuff, and she was like, "I got a hater today," and we're like, "Yay, you only need, like, 9 more." Because I said, "Once you get 10 haters, then it's like, you're on the right track of actually being authentic online," so
Oh, true, true. Again, I think that that's usually a sign when I say like the third part of my program is when you unleash, and this is when you start to get that, and people start to act different in your life because they realize that you're unstoppable. You're not looking for the permission slip anymore. You've redefined success, and you're going for it. And like the noise, their noise, and they're pushed to the side. These haters, I'll say one more thing. They don't realize that they're helping us. They're boosting our algorithm. So I'm like, it's fine. Like, who cares? No, like, who's really going to believe that? Nobody's going to believe that. That
yeah.
knows me. you know?
I know well, what's been fun for me is that I've, lately, every now and then I get a really good one where I'm like, "Oh my," and I will reply back and say, "Thank you so much. I'm gonna use this screenshot for my next speaking engagement." And
What do
they
they
lo
say? Do you get
oh,
anything
they love
back?
oh, no, they get even more mad, which is like and I'll just, like, use the whole chain, and I've actually used the screenshots because, to your point, a lot of people assume I've reached a certain level of success, and I'm like, "But this is what you get when you get to a certain point in your career also." You get people who wanna, say these things to you, and so, when I've shown those screenshots 'cause I teach a master class around, getting speaking engagements, and so I showed the women in that room, I said, "Hey, just so you know, when you do well, this is what's gonna happen. You will see people telling you that you suck and all these other things. So if you're gonna avoid, speaking out because you're trying to avoid the situation, you're not only depriving yourself of the message that you're giving to the rest of the world, but you're actually losing money by doing this." So I I have a lot of fun with those now. They used to bother me and now I'm like, "Oh, thanks for the screenshot. I'm gonna put this in my next slide."
Yeah, what a great reframe too. Like what a, that should be part of everybody's speaking presentation. So then they're hopeful. Like they're like, please, somebody give me one.
That's
I
funny.
hope it happens today. I hope it
Yeah.
happens today, which will help them be more authentic. It'll just roll it all the way back.
That's
a
exactly
lot
right.
faster. I can't thank you enough for being here. And you're such a bright light. You're your true, authentic self. I absolutely love everything about you. Where can people get your book, find out more about you, read your articles, all the things?
Sure. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. You can find me at crushyourmoneygoals.com. That's where you can see where the book is and all of our programs. I am also at Bernadette Joy, primarily on LinkedIn and YouTube. And if you are interested in just starting your financial journey with me, I have a free guide, no strings attached. So it's at crushyourmoneygoals.com/free guide. And I created a 5 week kind of plan for you, like day by day. Here are the things that you can learn and do to kickstart your plan if you're feeling stuck.
Awesome. Can't thank you enough. Thank you for being here. We'll link everything in the show notes.